selling all these ocean-going catamarans, and to me, he was the pinnacle of success. So at this party, I said, "Hey, Rich, how do you know what to do, to make yourself successful?" And thanks a lot. And he thought for a while, and he came back and said, "Brian, figure out what you can do better than anybody else, and then do it." And that went straight over my head. I had no idea what I was better than anybody else at, so I just kept drinking and went back to being an accountant. And but years and years later, I heard a story that reminded me of that evening. And it was about a book club, and there was a guy going to this book club week after week, and the leader would say, "Well, what do you want to write about?" He'd go, "Oh, I don't know." The next week, "What do you want to write about?" "Oh, I don't know." And so one night after the event, the leader was so frustrated, he bent down in the street and he picked up a piece of broken tile, and he said to the guy, "Okay, next week I want 2 pages on this piece of tile." Well, I probably would have quit the book club, but he didn't. He figured out that there were tiles made in a precast concrete plant, and there were 3 plants in his city. So he went down to the one closest to him, and he took this piece of tile and said, "Hey, did you make this?" And the foreman looked at it and goes, No, that was made by the factory on the other side of town." He goes, "You're kidding me, how can you tell?" He goes, "Well, there's the sand and the gravel and the glazing, no, it's definitely that factory." So the guy calls up and makes an appointment with the foreman in the other factory, and gets shown around the yard and all the big piles of sands and different coloured gravels that were there, and the silos of fly ash and cement, and the conveyor belts that go up into the batching system at the top where they mix everything with water and it pours out into moulds, and eventually it becomes clay tile. And he gets back to the book club the next week, and he hasn't written 2 pages, he's written an entire chapter on the making of tile. But he didn't stop there. He started going to libraries at weekends and pulling out books on tiles. And then he started doing vacations and going around local areas where they're tile manufacturing. And then he started booking big vacations where he traveled all across the world. Egypt and China, Mesopotamia, and the Greeks and the Roman baths and everything. And he ended up, after a couple of years, writing a book. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, that's what Rich was talking about. This guy became the best at what he did. Nobody else knew as much about tile as this guy, and I heard he was the only guy that published a book out of that entire book club. So, why did I tell you that story? It's sort of random, right? But I'm going to share some stories now about building the Ugg Boot brand, and I want to use 4 mantras that I've lived with. I found them in a book of philosophy about 30 years ago, and I wrote them down and I put them in my daily planner, and I carry it forward every 1st of January every year. And the first one is feast upon uncertainty. All right, you'll get that they're all very powerful. So let's go back to Perth. Can you believe 40 years ago? This is the 40th anniversary of UGG this year. And as I told you, I was an accountant and I hated it. And after 10 years of studying, I graduated and quit the same day. And I was sort of, just hanging out around the house and going surfing and just not knowing, drifting basically without a direction. And I was trying to figure out what I should do with my life. And who's ever heard the words of a song that's sort of been impactful in changing your life? Yeah, lots of hands, right? Here's the one that changed mine. Dark Side of the Moon. And I just bought the album. I ripped the cellophane off and was playing it. And the words of the second song was, tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And I thought, shit, he's talking to me. But then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And I was covered in goosebumps. I thought of all my friends tracking off to partnerships. And I thought of all my other friends who didn't go to college, but they started their own businesses out of high school. And here was I running on the spot for 10 years. And so I just discovered yoga back then out of a book, and that had led me into meditation. And I can remember one morning I was sitting there meditating, thinking, okay, what can I do? What can I, be? And suddenly I got this goosebump feeling again. And I had a thought that, wow, all the big trends are coming out of California, Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands and skateboards. And I thought, I'm going to go to California and I'm going to find the next big thing and I'm going to bring it back to Australia and make my fortune. And so within like 2 weeks, I arrived at LAX. I had my surfboard and my suitcase, and I rented a little house in Santa Monica. And all I did for the first couple of months was go to Malibu every day. So it's always been a huge dream of mine. And after the first couple of months, I still didn't find the next big thing. And another month, didn't find the next big thing. And then it got to be like October. And the water was getting cold and the wind was chilly. And I can remember pulling on my sheepskin boots that I brought from Australia. And I got this massive dose of goosebumps again. I thought, oh, God, there's no Ugg boots in America. And 1 in 2 Australians own some sort of sheepskin footwear. And I looked at my buddy Doug and said, oh man, we've got to go into business, man. We're going to be instant millionaires. I never thought that before. So, couldn't wait to get back to the house, and we did a little bit of research and called up this guy in Perth, Western Australia. His name was George Birch, and he was the owner of Country Leather, and he was a sheepskin boot manufacturer. And so, cut a long story short, we became his distributor, and we had to buy 6 pairs of boots, which we had to borrow $500 to do. And they arrived, and this is what the first sheepskin boot looked like. All of that yellow stain on the top is glue. All the stuff around the bottom is glue. And it's just 2 pieces of sheepskin sewn together and glued onto a piece of linoleum. That was basically the original Ugg boots. And that was the state of the art back then in Australia. And everybody wore them, right? So we ordered our 6 pairs, and they finally, as they arrived, and so Doug was going to be the salesman because I was terrified of sales. I was an accountant. And he came back after about 10 days, and he had a manila envelope full of about 150 business cards from every shoe store that he'd been to, and not a single order. And he goes, Brian, they tell me we're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And I sort of understood their logic, but they were wrong because Australia's climate is exactly like Southern California, right? And so I knew that wasn't the answer. And being an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to pivot. And so we thought, well, how come all my buddies at Malibu think this is the best idea in the world? And it went, oh my God, they all surfed and they'd all been to Australia to, on their surf trips. A bunch of them had bought boots back for their buddies. So within the surf community, it was really well known. So Doug and I pivoted, and this time he made sure I was going on the road as well, And so he started out on Monday, and by about Wednesday, I was so guilty for not getting on the road because I was so scared of it. I finally drove down to Con Surfboards in Santa Monica, and I had this little duffel bag and my pairs of boots, and I opened up and was just terrified. And the guy looked at him and goes, "Oh, Ugg boots, man, they're great. What are you doing with those?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking of bringing them in and importing them to America." "Oh my God, you're going to make a fortune. Those are the best." And I walked out of there going, "Wow, this selling's not so bad." Next store, there was the same thing. "Oh yeah, my friend brought some back for me. I've been wearing them for years. They're the best things. You're going to make a fortune." And this happened all the way down through Newport, Laguna, San Diego, and Doug was working the San Fernando Valley, and he was just kicking butt. And so we arrived back at our international headquarters at my little house in Santa Monica, and we started swapping. We started talking about how rich we were going to be and how quick. It never crossed our minds that neither of us had asked for an order. I mean, what's the point? We didn't have any inventory, right? So you've all heard that saying, I'm sure, that once you start out on a path, the universe will conspire to work with you. Who's heard that? Look, nearly everybody. It's an ancient saying. So we're talking about we need some product, and my roommate overheard us, and he said, well, there's some guys in my office looking for investments. So just like that, no business plan, just on my enthusiasm, we raised $20,000, which in today's money is about $70,000, right? And so we sent 15 down to Australia and ordered 500 pairs of boots. And then we waited, for probably 6 weeks, and it's now like late November, early December, and the boots finally arrived. And so Doug loaded up his car, and I loaded this time my van with a big duffel bag full of all the colours and sizes. And I go back down to Con Surfboards, and I walk in, and hey, Dave, here we go. How many do you want? And he goes, oh, Brian, well done, man, but we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops. And no, you should go to the shoe stores. You're going to make a fortune. So, and the same thing down, all the way down the coast through Newport, Laguna, San Diego, and the same with Doug back in the valley. And so after a week, we regrouped and we shipped out all the orders that we had. And here's the deposit slip for the first year's sales of UGG. 28 pairs, $1,000. Hugely disappointing. But the thing about this is that years and years and years later, I wrote a book, which is The Birth of a Brand, which we have tons over there at the table, and I'm signing them afterwards. But the theme of the book is that you can't give birth to adults, right? Every business, every service, every sitcom on TV, every new religion, every church, everything starts with conception, and then the first action's taken, and that's the birth. So the birth of UGG was me buying 6 pairs of samples. And then it just lies there, right? You've had the big aha, you launched it, and then it just lies there. And that is when most entrepreneurs give up, because they think it's failing, or they're failing, or the idea's no good, or whatever. But it's universal. And eventually it'll start, you can't overfeed it, or jiggle the cradle, or yell at it. It can't go to college. It has to be an infant, right? But eventually it'll start toddling, which is a cool phase, because the first buyers are talking about it, and the magazines are writing articles, and you're starting to get a little bit of traction. But that goes very quickly into the youth phase, where you've got consistent orders coming in, production's working great, the customer service and sales force is good, and all of the administration's great, and you can run a $20, $30 million business in that youth phase. But if it's a really, really good product or a really great service, you're going to hit the teenage years. And who can remember wanting to be at every party in town as a teenager? The same thing happens. You want to be in every big trade show. You want to be in all the big retailers, the big box stores, the mass distributors. And it's suicide, because you can just outstrip your capital so fast. And I almost lost UGG a couple of times during that phase. But eventually the administrators come and put all the controls in, and it becomes a mature company. And so that's a very, very normal phase for every business. So the next mantra I want to talk about is to fatten upon disappointment, right? And the story I used to tell this is the tadpole story, right? So that would have been a good time to give up. What do you think? Yeah. 28 pairs? But I couldn't. I still had 470-something pairs in the bedroom, the third bedroom. international headquarters. And so Doug went and got another job. Obviously, we couldn't pay each other. So I then started going to swap meets and street fairs. And the best venue I had was the back of the van at Malibu, because I'd go surfing and I'd just open up the van. And it got to be so popular with word of mouth that, you know, even if the surf was crappy, I still had to go because people were expecting me to be there, you know. But the sales got to about $5,000. And so the next, you know, I got a summer job. I think the first one was scrubbing boats in Marina del Rey for the summer. Second, you know, the next season came around and I thought, okay, I'm going to do some advertising. So I hired a couple of models, a guy and a girl, and posed the girl on the rock on the beach at Wind and Sea with perfect boots, you know, making up the most of the ad, and the perfect clothing and hair in the sunlight, you know, in the sunset. And we ran those ads, and the sales came to about 15,000. Horribly disappointing. So I got another summer job. This year I was a construction worker in Bel Air in near Beverly Hills. And so the next season I said, I'm going to run better ads. So I hired more expensive models and a more expensive photographer and posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea with the perfect boots and hair. And sales went to like $25,000. Couldn't believe what's going on. So then I had another summer job. This time I was working on a golf course as a greenskeeper, and that summer I decided I'm getting out of business. It's too hard. And so I'm just going to wait till it gets cold. I'm going to just sell off all the inventory and quit. So that day came, the huge storms hit the coast. You know how it does here in Southern Cal, that big north storm comes through, full of rain, and I got home drenched from the golf course. And the answering machine had like 30 messages on it from all the surf shop retailers going, Brian, we need boots, man. We got tons of people in the stores. We've got to get boots. We'll drive down. And then I realised, God, I really got to get my act together here because I can't be doing it as a part-time job. And so I decided, okay, I'll stick in here for one more season. And I thought, okay, what'll I do for advertising? And I was having a beer with one of my buddies who owns South Coast Surf Shop in Ocean Beach, and I'm explaining this dilemma about, you know, the ads being bad, and he said, oh, shut up, Brian. And he calls out the back, hey, you guys, you know, and all these 12, 13-year-old grommets come out, and he says, what do you guys think of Uggs? And every one of them just went, oh, man, those Uggs, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf. It's like, oh my God, it just hit me like a thunderclap, you know? It's like, of course they're so fake. And that caused me to then, you know, pivot like a good entrepreneur. And a couple of days later, I called up a buddy of mine, Pete Townend, who was running a national scholastic surf association up in Orange County. And I said, Pete, do you have any young kids who are going to turn pro soon? And he gave me 2 guys, and I paid them in Ugg boots. And but we just, instead of, you know, the photographer, I just took I had a camera with a telephoto lens, and we just went surfing. But I picked Trestles in San Onofre, and I picked Black's Beach down in La Jolla, because these are classic walks, right? They're a mile long, fantastic surf at the end. And so I just did my own photographs. And this is what they came out like. And I ran these ads in October, November, December, and the sales went to $220,000. Why? Because I'd captured the imagination of these young surf kids and stuck it in a photograph. And all I wanted to do was try to get every little kid who reads Surfer magazine to open up the ad and go, oh my God, I wish I was going surfing with Mike Parsons, you know? And so when I tapped into that emotional part of things, that was the beginning of me understanding marketing and advertising, and that was a skill that I took on as a passion. I mean, I became a student of advertising after that, and that's partly why the UGG brand became what it did. It's been the 6th year in the billions now. And so the interesting thing is here, thank you. Look how big the UGG boots are. Look how tiny the UGG boots are. It's almost invisible. And that's a testament to the fact that you don't sell your product. It doesn't matter what you have, don't sell your product. You sell the benefit of the product. You sell, and if you can do that benefit with emotion and an angst to put into the readers, then you have a really, really successful advertisement. So if you have, if you develop a piece of software that saves time, you don't run an ad of that photograph of your software in an electronics magazine. You take a photo of some guy in the Bahamas sipping a rum drink with all the time he's saving from your product, right? So it's not even subtle. It's really obvious that you advertise the benefit. And so the lesson that came from this, and this is why I call it my tadpole story, is that the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole. Yeah. Because you can't accelerate time, you can't accelerate this birth to adults process. But the key word in this quote is happily, or whatever, it's joyfully here, but happily or joyfully. And if you think that UGG's the only business that this happened to, I'll tell you that at the same time I started UGG, there was a company up in Oregon selling these nylon running shoes they were importing from Japan called Blue Ribbon. And they'd been trying 5 or 6 years to get into this running market, and they were advertising the running magazines and the athletic college magazines, trying to get into the colleges. And then the sport of jogging took off right at the same time as they changed their name to Nike. And they just got sucked into this vortex of demand. Why? Because they were the best at what they did at the time. Right? They were the best running shoe at that time, and they'd spent 6 years trying to get to the best, right? And so because the market took off, they were the leaders. They got sucked into hundreds of millions and then billions. And there was another little company up in Santa Monica at the same time I started, and for more than 10 years they'd been trying to get this little kid leather white shoe into the dance studios. And they were advertising to all the dance, magazines across the country, and they were also trying to get into the college athletic departments for the cheerleaders and everything. And guess what? The sport of aerobics takes off, and that was Reebok. And who was the best at the time with the most perfect boot for aerobics? Bam! Reebok just got sucked into this vortex of hundreds of millions. And to put it in perspective, I read the book called Shoe Dog, which was the sort of story of Nike, written by Phil Knight. And would you believe that the first 6 years' sales of UGG was greater than the first 6 years' sales of Nike? Wow! Isn't that amazing? I never knew that till like 6 months ago. But it does show, though, that this theme of birth to adults is universal. So my next mantra, the third one, is invigorate in the presence of difficulties. So let's fast forward 6 years. We're doing about 2.5 million in sales. And remember the investor that we had it for 20 grand? I thought we would never, ever need any more money than that, right? Well, we had to buy them out and bring in a bigger group, and then we had to buy them out and bring in a bigger group. And now we've got to the final deal in my mind, right? We've got 3 new guys from Anaheim, Neil, Paul, and Joe, and they're all putting money in, and I'm bringing the business in, and we're all going to own it 25% each. And I'm thinking this is the best deal in the world. And so we moved all of the inventory up to Anaheim, and the 2 parts of the deal I really loved was one, that I was going to be the sales rep now for Southern Cal, and they were going to do all the receiving and shipping and all the accounting, and I was going to be the sales rep on the road. The other part of it was not very great for me, but I didn't get my 25% stock issued until I finished up the little trademark lawsuit that I was working on with a company called UGHS. But I knew I'd win it because I could prove that we were here, I was there first. And so we moved everything up to Anaheim and got it all ready, and so I head on the road for my first sales call, and I drive down Beach Boulevard to Huntington Beach, and I go into Huntington Surf and Sport, and Dave goes, "Hey Brian, I heard you sold the business." I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I called an order in this morning. They said you don't own it anymore." I said, "You're kidding me, they said that?" And I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I went to the Shell gas station next door, because this is before cell phones, right? I called up Anaheim. I go, "Neil, what are you telling people?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You're telling them I don't own the company." "Yeah, well, you don't." "Yes, I do. You're my 3 new partners." "No, you don't get your stock certificate." And I just hung up, and I got in the car and I drove back to San Diego. And I pulled out the contract and I read it, and I reread it, and I went, "Oh shit, I don't own the company." And I went into this huge depression, because I'd seen myself as the CEO of this huge international trading business one day, and now I didn't even own the company. And for like 3 days, I just moped about the house. I didn't go out of the house for 3 days. I didn't make a phone call. I couldn't even think of answering the phone. And it was on the 3rd night that I'd been in this, mood. And I remember lying on my back on the living room floor, and my wife was sitting up on the couch, and we'd been watching TV, and the show finished, and I remember clicking it off. And I rolled over onto my stomach, and I got up on my hands and knees and started crawling towards the bedroom. And my wife, God love her, she's really quiet. She just looked at me and says, "You get up now and walk to bed like a man." She scared the shit out of me. And it was like, as I came up off the floor, it was like coming out of a fog. And I thought, oh my God, there's so much more to life than this crappy little sheepskin business. And that night I slept like a baby. And I got up the next morning and I get back into my Mr. Positive mode and doing my meditation, and thought, okay, well what am I gonna do? And I thought, well, I'd be real estate, no, business broker, maybe, accountant, never. And then I got this massive dose of goosebumps again. So I'm going to segue. Who's had goosebumps? Right? I didn't need to ask that question. Here's my take on goosebumps, right? I don't believe that God is way the heck out there at the end of the universe somewhere. I really believe there's a fragment of the spirit, of one spirit. Everyone has got a fragment of that in us.
Yep.
And it has a mission that it wants to complete in our lifetime, right? And I believe that every time we get those goosebumps, I've noticed it's some momentous or important thing that I've just realized or made a decision upon or become aware of, and so I really think that's and it comes out as goosebumps. So I want you all to think about that next time you get the goosebumps, and just stop and think, wow, I wonder what I just thought or saw or whatever. So anyway, why did I get those goosebumps? I thought, sales. I've come to love sales. Okay, now what can I sell? And that's when the goosebumps hit. Ugg boots. I love Uggs. So I ate humble pie. I went back to Anaheim and I told the guys, look, I may never own this company, but I'm going to go on the road. I'm going to try and make sure I get every single person in this country wearing a pair of Ugg boots. And so I did. I went on the road, and selling was different now. When I first started out as an accountant, I thought selling was getting something from somebody all the time, like money. But now I'm out there and I'm walking into the surf shops. The owner's not even there today, so I go over to the sheepskin boot area and I take out the 13s and the 4s, and I put 6s and 7s in, because I know they're going to sell better. And I rearrange the whole shelf, and I'm keeping the inventory, in track. And this was happening with every single store I was in. And some of them, was so easy, going out and doing the customer service. And I got back after that first month and got into the warehouse at Anaheim, and Neil hands me an envelope, and it's, a check for $5,000. He says, that's your commissions. And that was the first money I ever pulled out of the company. Wow. Right? 6 years. And I get back the next month and another check. This one's $10,000. And the next month, another $10,000. And I'm going, wow, this is pretty damn good. I'm not doing any receiving, accounting, shipping, and nothing. I'm out there playing golf or surfing with my buddies who own the surf shops, and I'm just having a ball. And that led me to another great piece of philosophy, which is nearly always whoops, where'd that go? It says sometimes, but it's always. Your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings. And please feel free to take photos of any of these points, because they're very, very cool points of philosophy. So, who's had a disappointment within the last year where you look back now and think, thank God that happened? Look at all these hands, right? It is so common. And so I've got so blasé now, if something goes wrong, I just go, that's good. Now, what's good about it, right? Did you notice the mindset? What's good about it? And it's uncanny how fast a solution will come up that you look back a couple of weeks or a month later and go, gee, that was pretty lucky, Look how slick it's working now, So what do we got next here? Whoops, let me back up. There we go. So let's fast forward another 10 years. The final mantra I have for you is enthuse over apparent defeat. Enthuse over apparent defeat. Because defeat's not a real thing until the second you give up, right? It's just apparent defeat, right? And it's never a real thing. So now we're doing about, another 10, we're probably 10 years in business now. We're doing about 6 million. And I've now been 3 years on the road. And in the meantime, Neil has bought Paul and Joe out, so he owns 100% of the company. And I've put up about 2 or 3 million, 1.5 million frequent flyer miles traveling with all the sales reps. We had 30 different reps across the country. And now sales, like everybody across the country knew Mr. Ugg, it's sort of cool. And, but as we got more and more into the season, Neil had realised what an asset I was coming in at Christmas time and working on the shipping in the warehouse till midnight, even though it wasn't my job. And he really, liked the way we were working together. So he says, come on in, Brian, we're going to issue you 25% of stock next week. And I was in heaven. And in the meantime, we took out life insurance policies on each other, and he bought 2 company cars, which I got. A brand new Acura, which was like within a week of Acura ever coming out. That was so cool. And so I was on cloud 9 with the way I was going to get my stock back. And so over the weekend, I was out driving, and my wife called. And now I've got a cell phone, right? It's the size of a brick with a cord that goes down the thing. But I had an antenna on the back of the car, which was like such a cool status symbol. And it's Laura, and she's crying. And I go, Laura, what's wrong? She said, oh, Brian, Neil's just died. My world just started to crash again. I knew everything was looking so good. And he'd been in a motocross race. He was a big racer, and had a massive heart attack during the race and never recovered. So I called up his widow and said, hey, look, I'll be up tomorrow, and we'll try and figure out where we're at. She'd never set foot inside the business. She had no idea what was going on. And then I made this fateful call to George Bircher at Country Leather in Australia. And I knew he wasn't going to like this, because he just had 3 years of fantastic payments on time, and I knew he was going to remember back to when I was running the company. Right? And I always paid him 100%, but he never knew when it was coming. I never knew when it was going. And so I made that call, and don't worry, George. We've done the trade shows. We've got new styles and colours, and I'll find the money. I'm going to find the money to refinance it. I'll find out where the business is. And it's like a dead silence on the other end. So we hung up. I went up and met with Della, Neil's wife, and I told her, look, I'll be a forensic accountant for the year. I'll come in and try and figure out where the company's at. And that became the longest 8 months of my life, because I started commuting every day, 5 hours, and so then I started getting the train up on Monday morning and coming back Friday night, and every Friday night my throat was just chronically sore. And I knew all the midnight to 5 a.m. stuff at Bob's Big Boy because I was in there doing the schedules and drinking coffee, you know. And it was the best of times and the worst of times, right? The best of times was that we just developed black and charcoal, 2 new colours, and it was kicking butt with all the reps all across the country. So the sales were coming in really strong with that. The worst of times was that I'd written a business plan and some forecast projections, and keep in mind we're 10 years into the business now, and I'm starting to walk through all the banks, and everyone was going, oh, Uggs, man, they're such a fad, they won't be around next year. To the next one, oh, Uggs, yeah, you've been lucky, but it's a fad, they won't be around next year. So I couldn't get banked, you know. The investment bankers, they just saw nothing happening for 9 months, and then October, November, December, back to nothing. So they were terrified. And so it was incredibly, really hard to finance. And the other bad thing was that the orders are coming in so fast from all the reps across the country that I'm bundling them up into 5,000 pair, groups, and I'm calling George. I, fax the order down, and George, have you started production yet? Well, how are you going to pay me? Don't worry, George, I'm working on the financing. Have you started production? Well, and 2 weeks later, I've got 10,000 pairs. George, the black and the charcoal are doing fantastic. Well, I can't seem to find the black and the charcoal skins, And this went on for month after month, April, May, June, and I started really getting worried that he was not going to play ball. And so about July, I started lateral thinking again, and I thought, well, who could benefit from us staying in business? And I finally hit upon the tanneries, that produce the sheepskins. And so I found a big tannery in Melbourne called Jackson's Tannery, and Gordon Jackson was the owner. And I sent a business plan down to him, and he just lit up, and he called me in and said, oh, come on down, man, this is fantastic. We're going to take on the world. And so I, got Uggs labels on it, which I thought was sort of appropriate, And that's when I knew I'm out of business. My own supplier's done an end run. Didn't tell me. That was what hurt the most. He never called me and told me what was going on. And so I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell all my staff. I didn't tell the sales reps. And we just wrote a record $250,000 worth of orders, and knowing that we wouldn't ship any of them. And Laura and I had already decided that, on Monday we'll call up all the best customers and we'll tell them to go buy the Thunderwear, Thugs boots, because it was all our product anyway. And so we packed the show up, drove back home, and that night, the last call I made was to Gordon Jackson at the tannery, and I said, hey Gordon, listen, thanks so much for all the effort we put into this, but George has done an end run, and Laura and I are going to shut it down for the year. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're out of business this year. So, and he was sad. We hung up. Then about 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. Yeah, hello, Brian. It's Gordon. Screw George Bircher. I'll get you all the boots you need. And just like that. We were back in business again. No handshakes, no contracts, no nothing, just one Aussie to another. And so I sent the patterns down, and he duplicated them and sent them out to 4 or 5 manufacturers, and he cranked his tannery up to full production. And he started churning out skin, tan skins off to the manufacturers. And pretty soon we got 2,000 pairs on a Friday, and then every Friday for October, November, December, was 5,000 pairs every Friday would hit our dock. And our retailers knew the system by now, so they were driving down with their vans every Friday to the warehouse and picking up as much as, and we were like, they wanted 20 pairs of size 7s, I'd give them 10, right? And we were, rationing the stuff because I had to still ship to the rest of the customers across the country. But Saturday lunchtime, we were absolutely dry. Next Friday, 5,000 pairs, Saturday afternoon dry. And this went on all the way through to the end of the year. And so we survived. I really didn't care that we threw away over $1 million worth of orders, because we were still in business and we still had UGG labels out there in the marketplace. And that's all I was so grateful. And two things happened, two really weird things happened between Christmas and New Year. First, the life insurance policy paid out. And it was just enough to buy the entire business back from his widow at full value, including the profit we just made that year. And so she walked away with, her, investment, Neil's investment intact, right? And I got the business 100% with no money. The other weird thing that happened is that between Christmas and New Year, the brokers had shipped 2,000 pairs of thugs to our warehouse and 1,000 pairs of Uggs to theirs, right? So I called the guy up and I said, let's swap them out, as much as I wanted to destroy his boots. So I drove up to San Clemente and we traded them all out. And as I was driving back home down the, through Camp Pendleton there, that's always I always come down every time I hit Camp Pendleton, getting out of LA. And I was thinking, how come we couldn't keep boots in the warehouse for 24 hours and the Thunderwear warehouse, which was way bigger than ours, was floor to ceiling full of sheepskin boots after Christmas. And that's when I realized the loyalty of my customers was so powerful that they threw away over $2.5 million worth of orders at retail rather than buy from somebody that they knew had knocked me off. And that was so humbling and so gratifying to know that all of those years I'd spent out there in their stores really meant something. And we're in a world now of websites and clicks and searches and clicks and everything's clicks and it's so easy to lose track of who your customers are, right? But I implore you that you must reach out through the internet and keep a really, really good communication going with your retailers, right? Or with your customers, whoever you sell product to. And I've had a first-hand experience with this. I was lucky enough recently, about 3 or 4 years ago, to work with a girl in San Diego who's developed a brand new lamb leather sash bag, and it's like a pouch in the front and back, nothing on the hips, so you wear it like apparel. And that little bag fits everything you can have in the most giant bag, that you normally carry. And when she started out, she was doing about $30,000 in sales, and I was amazed that every single time she shipped a bag out, there was a note made, and within a week, that customer got a phone call. Hey, did you get your sash bag? What do you think about it? And she had this following going. Well, last year, we shipped $3 million worth of product on Facebook sales alone. She's got this fanatical following. This is just the sash group. This isn't the 40,000 person mailing list that we've developed in 3 years. This is just the sash group, and they're absolutely fanatical about the product and they sell like crazy. And Nicole just put out on Facebook, hey, would anyone like to have a sash bash and get together? And she's booked out the Dana Hotel for next March, and it's sold out. And these women are coming from Canada and all across the East Coast to have a party around a bag. How's that for customer service? How's that for engagement? And here's the cream on the top. We wanted to get onto Amazon, and I'm holding it back. Look, we don't have the production, because you saw all the shit I was going through with UGG, right? So I'm going, we don't even go to Amazon, we don't have the product, you go out there, you're going to kill your. And so I helped to raise $400,000 for capital to get money from the factory in China. And then she had an idea, well, look, I want to do an extension on this so you can put a tablet in there and make a square bag. So let's do another Kickstarter campaign. 2 months ago, we closed on 1.1 million in sales. And 72% of the buyers had never been on Kickstarter before. So they were all from this group. So the point is, your customers, your existing customer base is the most critical thing. So anyway, how did I get through those 4 years? Here are the mantras, and I really think everyone should take their phones out and take a photo of this, because if you can figure out a way to print it and stick it on your refrigerator, they sound like real negative statements, but in fact they're the most positive statements, and it doesn't matter if you're in business or in your personal life or your marriage or your friends, no matter what comes up, one of these will help you get through it. And that's the reason I got through that year in Anaheim of having no product. So where's my timer down here? Here we go. Good, okay. So let me tell you some good stories. Who believes in karma? Okay, so now we're, 15, 16 years in business. I really want to get a really cohesive marketing image together, because we're huge in surfing, we're really big in snowboarding and skiing. In Minnesota they don't do either of those, so they play hockey, right? Huge market. Mums have to sit in the rinks, so I developed using that same type of theme of getting the young pros into the ads, had done it, but now it's getting so big, I want a really cohesive image, so I came up with the words casual comfort, and I figure, okay, I want to get casual comfort on the main front page of the lifestyle section of USA Today. So we spent about $60,000 putting together this huge PR campaign, and I practiced it all in different cities, and now I had an appointment with Margaret at USA Today in the fashion editor, and it was for 3 o'clock on the Wednesday, and the girl from the PR agency and I arrived at 5 to 3, and said, she comes running out going, "Oh, Brian, I'm so sorry. I've double booked. I've got a conference call at 3 I have to be on. I've got 5 minutes." And I knew that my presentation was 40 minutes. I'm a depressed kid. I had all the touchy-feely sheepskins. And I just looked at Linda and I saw we just blew it, And but I had to think laterally, and I thought, okay, what can I do? So I instinctively reached down, I pulled out this folder, a tatty old folder, and I'd been throwing articles in there of all the celebrities that I've seen over the years, and starting with Neil Young and Tom Petty, Sting. These are all from, Rolling Stone magazine, and Hollywood, we got into there. Brooke Shields. I quickly flicked by that one because nobody wears Ugg boots on the beach in a red swimsuit. Right? So I quickly flick over to Heather Locklear, and Margaret goes, go back, who is that? And it's Pamela Anderson, right? And so she grabs it out of my hand, she writes down the name of the photographer and the name of the tabloid, because someone had sent it to me from London. And she said, do you have a press kit? Yep, got to go. 4 minutes. And I just looked at Linda and go, that was a waste of money, god damn. So I got back in, to O'Hare Airport on the next morning, and I'm flying back to San Diego, and I buy USA Today, and I open up the front section and the money section, and then the next section, and man, here's the photograph of Pamela Anderson, front and center on the lifestyle page, and then you open it up to the next. It was a completely new. The entire next page was all about Uggs, right? And it wasn't what I'd given her. She must have gone online all night or something, and she had researched the shearling industry and the trends and the history of sheepskin coming and going in fashion. And she wrote this incredible expose, but what really pissed me off is she mentioned all my competitors, right? Which I thought was horrible at the time. But I had been trying to get into all the malls, like Kinney, Nordstrom, Tom McCann, all the big Montgomery Ward stores. No way. These are I hope some of you are old enough to remember that. But we get nowhere. But as soon as she launched that with all of the competitors, we started getting calls from all the department stores and all the mall stores. And the reason is, they don't want to take a risk on one product, right? But what Margaret did, she created a category of shearling footwear. And so all the buyers are going, shoot, we better be on this category. Who's the leader, right? And guess who was the leader of the category? It was UGG. And we, just like Nike, just like Reebok, we got sucked into that vortex, right? And the other really good bit of karma that happened was, for years we'd been shipping product to this girl in London. Well, not to her, but she'd give us a list of 20 people every Christmas, and we'd been doing it for 4 or 5 years. And it was a pain in the butt, because we had to do separate boxes, separate customs invoices. It took a long time, usually in the height of the rush, right? But it was Trudy Styler, who was the wife of Sting, and we were part of it, wanted to be part of this whole thing. And she finally called this Christmas and goes, Brian, I need a biggest favour. She said, I've just been to a seminar, it's changed my world. I need the most perfect pair of tall sand, size whatever, boots, and to get organised with Oprah. But when she finally came on, and with best picks for Christmas, and Oprah's favourite things, we were 20 minutes on national TV when she was at the peak, and the elves are running around in UGG boots, and there's UGG boots under the chairs for all the audience, and it was just like, there wasn't enough money in the world to buy what we got 2 years in a row from that. And so that's when UGG got sucked into this vortex of millions and hundreds of millions and eventually the billions. So to bring this all full circle, okay? Remember the story about Rich?
Yeah.
Right? So when I first came to America, I had no idea about shipping and freighting and importing and, all of the stuff that went on with that. But after nearly 20 years of running the business, just before I sold it, I had got favourable rates of customs. I knew all the shipping, quirks, like I never left it until mid-December to get my product in for Christmas because that's strawberry season in Australia, and they bump, hard goods for perishables. So I learned all of these little nuances, and I became really good at that. I had no idea about shoe manufacturing. But after 18, 20 years, I developed maybe 5 different styles, and that led to 20 different colours, and then the trimmings, and so I ended up knowing the intricacies of the sheepskin boot manufacturing business. And when I started, I had no idea about the whole, the sheepskin industry, but after the 20 years, I could look at a boot that just arrived in a box, and I could tell if that sheep had been in a wet season or a dry season from the texture, right? We were buying futures in lambskin because we're a byproduct of the meat industry, and lamb is sold, if it goes over 365 days, lamb becomes mutton and the value just plummets. So the lambs are all killed before 1 year, and so if we didn't use those skins, they'd be dumped in a landfill somewhere. So we were like recycling skins. But I can remember watching them dump a white skin into a drum of brown dye, and they'd pull it out, and the fleece is white and the skin's dark brown, right? Wow. But then they could take another white skin and dump it in another vat, and it'd be the opposite. The fleece had come out brown and the skin white, So there's all these intricacies in the industry that I got to learn. And when I started UGG, I knew nothing about marketing. Remember all those ads I started running in the beginning? How fake they were? But by the time I sold the company, I had developed such an incredible repertoire of images and photographs, and I had a following, sort of like Nicole's sash bag. It was, that's why I love that business, because we had the same thing with UGG. It was, oh, Mom, everyone's cool kids at school got a pair of Uggs, I have to have it. It was passionate, right? And so that was because of the marketing and the advertising that I did. And when I started UGG, I knew nothing about the retail industry. I didn't know the difference between big boxes and specialty stores. And I had no idea how the malls work. Keystone, which is marking up, discounts, returns, shipping, all that sort of stuff. Merchandising, man, that was a huge issue we had to deal with. And yet after after all those years, I sold it after about 20 years, and I can remember in that closing year, I was standing on this beautiful balcony with water fountains around, a beautiful clubhouse in the back of me. It was a golf club in New Jersey, a private golf club. And I was standing out there looking over the first tee and thinking, you know, how the did I get here? Right? And I was a guest of the president of Kinney Shoes, who was the most powerful person in footwear at that time. And I remember thinking, how the hell did I get here? And it was because of what Rich said. I had become the best in my little niche, right? In the shoe industry, I was like a blip, right? But within my little niche, I was the best at what I did, and that best became a billion-dollar company over and over and over again. So what I want to leave you with is the fact that the book that I've written has it's like got a zillion more stories like that. You know, there's some chapters you better make sure there's no razor blades close by. Others are fantastic. You know, so it's a real trip. It's a real fast, easy read. We're going to have them over there. I'm signing books for you if you like. And what I want to leave you with is the fact that don't look at where you are now as whether you're successful or not successful, because it's a journey, right? My journey hasn't stopped, and everything is out there laid in front of you, and as long as you can try and keep being better and better and better at what you do every day, then you'll end up a frog. So thank you very much.
Let's give it one more time for Brian.